great sadness of our hearts, the appalling terrorist attacks in Paris. There really are no words to describe these heinous, egregious crimes that were committed. Unfortunately, those aren't the only terrorist attacks, though. It seems as though so often when we pay attention to the news, we learn about terrible crimes, evil crimes that have been committed around the world. And in light of all of these experiences of darkness and evil, there are many who like to make precise predictions about when the end of the world will come. Many think perhaps it might come soon. But today in the Gospel, Jesus explains to us that nobody knows when the end will come except the Father. And so for us Catholics, we tend to stay away from making these precise predictions about exactly when the end of the world will come. Quite frankly, we don't need to make these predictions because our scriptures today, and many other scriptures as well, offer us a different story, a different narrative, which doesn't tell us precisely when it will happen, but what it does tell us is what we need to know to live out our lives of faith, to carry us toward salvation. What our scripture passages show us, and what they offer us really, is a framework, you could say, to understand the end times. So, if you're paying attention to the first reading from the book of Daniel and to the Gospel, in all honesty, you probably were confused a little bit. These are pretty complex, confusing readings. They're readings that we speak of as part of the genre of apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature. Well, what is this? Well, it's written to be precisely what I said, literature, not written to be historical, literary, or literal accounts of what will take place. And so there is a theological symbolism that underlines all of this very complex, somewhat esoteric language that we hear in the scriptures. Apocalyptic literature is always something that reveals or uncovers or unveils something. So, what about our readings today? What is revealed to all of us? Well, what is revealed is that Christ has come to establish his kingdom. That is a new world, a new order, a new earth, where peace and justice and love will reign. That means that something is passing away in this apocalyptic literature, and what is passing away is the old world, the old earth, the old order of darkness and sin. So these are the two elements that we see in all apocalyptic literature. Something new is being revealed, and something old is being put aside. This is explained to us in our readings today through two primary elements. The first is that there will be a battle that takes place, and after the battle, there will be a final judgment. Now, both of the readings talk about this. First, from the prophet Daniel, we heard these words: "At that time there shall arise Michael, the great prince, guardian of your people. It shall be a time of unsurpassed distress." He's describing a great spiritual battle. And then after that, there's a final judgment. Some shall live forever. Others shall be in everlasting horror and disgrace. Similarly, Jesus picks up on these two themes. First, the battle. In those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. And then the judgment. The Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Okay, so let's back up. So what we see here is that through this battle and the ensuing final judgment, something new is being revealed. And that is God's reign, God's kingdom of peace, love, and light. What is being put aside, what is passing away, is the old kingdom of sin, death, and darkness. And insofar as these apocalyptic readings show us that something new is coming into place, they offer us a framework to understand the end times. Now, in a sense, we already live in the end times because God's kingdom has been revealed. 2,000 years ago, when God took on our flesh, and took all the sins of the world to the cross, and through a selfless act of sacrificial love, defeated them. Through his resurrection, we see that a definitive victory has been laid to that old world of sin and darkness and death. And that means that his kingdom of light has already come into the world. But look, it's not already entirely here yet, right? It has been initiated, but we are not yet at the end. And so the final judgment has not yet happened. We often don't think about the second coming of Christ and the final judgment, but it's something that we profess in our creed every single Sunday, that Christ will come again to judge the living and the dead. At this point in time, the end will happen, and all things will culminate in God himself. Christ will fully restore all creation to the Father, but that has not yet come to play. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us kind of in the middle, to be honest. It leaves us after the time of the initiation of God's kingdom, and it also leaves us before that final judgment. That means that we have a serious mission. Living in this in-between time of the end times, you could say, both bookends, we have a serious mission to be open to God's grace so that his light, his love, his peace, his forgiveness, and his justice would come to be fully established in this earth, or at least more established day by day. And insofar as we open ourselves to that grace, look, we are participating in God's work of putting aside the old kingdom of darkness and sin and death. And so what we see here in our readings today, first off, don't be too intimidated by these apocalyptic scriptures, right? You can understand the basic motifs that are flowing through them. You can sense the symbolism a bit. Through these scriptures, God is offering us a way to understand the end times, a framework, if you will. The old order is being put aside, but as we see in our world events around us, is not yet entirely dispelled. And so all of those evil events that we see happening in the world should remind us of our true mission. They should remind us of our purpose. And that is to live holy lives in loving service of God and our neighbor, so that his kingdom and his reign of peace, justice, and love would become established in this earth, leading us all to the fulfillment of our heavenly home.